Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 122C string trimmer. Customer complaint is that it'll start, but it just won't rev up. Let's check it out. That wasn't very good. That wasn't very good either. Let's try it again. So if you noticed, I was able to feather the choke and keep it running, kinda. So that means that it's starving for fuel. Now, there's a lot of different reasons why that's a possibility. It could be bad fuel. It could be a problem with the fuel filter. It could be a hole in the fuel line. It could be a problem inside the carburetor. It could be a carburetor adjustment. First thing I want to look at is the fuel that's in the tank. It smells good. I don't see water in the bottom of my funnel, so the water would settle to the bottom. And if he's using Husqvarna oil, that's about the right shade of blue. So this trimmer uses a wick style fuel filter on it, and it's not something I can easily just fish out of the tank to test the fuel line or to look at the filter. The easiest way to do it is remove these 3 screws that hold the air filter housing on, and if you just want to look at the fuel filter, this is all the deeper you really need to go so you can pop that grommet out of the top of the tank. But I want to go a little bit deeper. First I want to look in the cylinder, make sure this is going to be a worthwhile effort. And it looks clean and shiny in there. I don't see any problems with the condition of the piston and cylinder. Just put that plug right back in there and forget that ever happened. So there's our gasket for the carburetor. And I'm going to pop these fuel lines off the carb because I am going to open up the carb and take a look. Here's the grommet. We pop that out of the top of the tank. You'll see that there's 3 lines. One of them is the line with the filter on it. One's a return line, and the other one's a tank vent. So this one line with the filter on it looks a little bit beat up. We could pressure test that, but I'm probably just going to replace it. The green line is the return line. We're just going to clean a little bit of schmutz off this carburetor here before we open it up. There's 4 screws on the top of the carb where the primer bulb is, and that gains us access to the metering diaphragm. And if you follow these videos, 19 times out of 20, that metering diaphragm is stiff, and I'll be putting a kit in it. But it felt really good. It was very pliable, and I didn't see any good reason for taking it out of there. I probably would have wrecked the gasket if I would have peeled it off of there. So I just put it all back together. We'll be fine with that. Let's look at the fuel pump side, and we'll take a look at the micro screen and see if there's any gunk in there, because if that micro screen was plugged up, it would also starve the carburetor for fuel. But it looked good. Didn't see any problems with it. If anything on here, the fuel filter does look a little bit dark. That could be our problem. And sometimes you can have a scum build up in the carburetor. It's not real visible, but it's kind of looks like just a shiny scum. And if it builds up over that micro screen, you know, that can block fuel flow as well. And I did blow the screen clean while I had it open. So here's our new filter. You can see the difference in the color on them. The old one's kind of dirty. We're going to replace that fuel line too. I don't think I ever actually pressure tested it. But there was one spot on there that was kind of beat up pretty bad, and it could have been sucking air there. I mean, I guess it would have been nice to know the answer, but I already had it stuck in my head that I was replacing it, so it doesn't really change the outcome. So I'm going to cut a tape run into that line and push it through the grommet. There we go. And then I'm going to want to cut that taper off the end of the line. And there's our fuel line assembly. I'm just kind of lining up where those fuel lines are going to land and see if I got enough fuel line pulled through that grommet. It looks like I just make a little adjustment here. Now that whole fuel grommet, fuel line, filter, tank vent assembly is ready to go. Before I put it back in the tank, I decided I'm going to open up the high and the low speed jets each a quarter of a turn. Now, doing that at this point, again, doesn't help me answer the question of what was wrong. Was it the filter? Was it the line? Was it just the carburetor adjustment? I don't care. I mean, if I'm going to go through and do each one of these steps anyway, does it really matter? After having done this for decades, I got a pretty good idea that it was a combination of the filter and the carb adjustment with the possibility of the line. The customer doesn't want to know why or what. If I tell them it was a tune-up, they'll be happy with that, as long as their trimmer runs. If you're young and you're new to doing this, it's hard for me to recommend just doing one thing, putting it all back together, and then maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, because you're going to have to take it all back apart. If you're on your own time, that's wonderful. But if you're on the company clock, you kind of knock out all the simple little things that you have access to at that time. So we're going to put the fuel lines back on the carburetor. And then we're going to have to put that throttle cable with the little Z-bend. We'll put that into the hole on the carburetor linkage. Now if I just wanted to try the fuel filter and put this all back together, that's a lot of extra work. Who's paying for that? I find something that doesn't need to be replaced, like the metering diaphragm, well then I'm not going to do it. But at least I looked at it, and I know that if this still doesn't run right, the metering diaphragm isn't the reason why. So now we're getting the gasket to stay on these screws while we get the screws started. You know, that sounds pretty simple, but sometimes it's a little harder in real life than you'd think. Double checking again to make sure the gasket didn't shift on me, and then drawing it down. So there's two screws that go through the carburetor, and then there's a third screw. I'm just looking here, make sure I got the linkage. Yep, got the choke linkage lined up right. I got the tank vent put in a holder that's on the air filter housing. And I'm doing a function check on a throttle cable. It looks good too. So like I was saying, there's a third screw here. And that screw basically if you drop this thing on the air filter cover on the ground or something hits it, that third screw is going to kind of prevent you from busting the carburetor off the plastic intake insulator. It's going to help hold all that stuff rigid. So we have a foam air filter we put on there, and now the air filter cover. And we're putting fresh fuel in it. So let's fire this thing up and see if it runs. And if it does, I'll do a little bit of tuning on it. And that's all I'll have for you on the Husqvarna 122C. That just kind of bogged and needed the choke feathered in order to run. Thanks for watching. Later.